Okay, so get this.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about two guys who, decades apart, just kind of snapped. Well,
Oh,
maybe not snapped exactly, but they both took these vehicles on, like, totally unauthorized joyrides.
okay.
And we're not talking, like, stolen cars or anything. We're talking a plane and a city bus.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, and that's what I thought was so interesting about the articles that you sent. It's like they force us to confront these universal questions, about freedom, societal pressure, and really like the deep mystery of human motivation.
Yeah, right. It's like on the surface, you've got this Seattle airport worker, Richard Russell.
Mm.
In 2018, he just like hops into a plane and takes off. And then you've got William Sumaila way back in 1947, this New York City bus driver
Wow.
who decides to just take his bus all the way down to Florida.
Just on a whim.
Out of the blue.
Yeah.
Two guys, two totally different eras,
Right.
but they both make this leap into the unknown.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating is, I mean, their stories are shocking, definitely. But they really do tap into, I think, this deep-seated desire a lot of us have to just break free from the mundane to escape. But as we'll see, I think their motives were a lot more complex than just a simple desire for adventure.
Yeah, definitely. So let's start with Richard Russell, this image of him just taking a plane. From the Seattle airport, it's crazy. You'd think someone would have noticed, right? Like, come on.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what makes the story so compelling.
Yeah.
Because the article highlights how, like, his background, at least on the surface, offers no real explanation for his actions. He had a wife, loving family, friends who described him as kind and helpful. It's not like he was, some disgruntled loner in his basement or anything.
And he was loading bags onto planes all day long, day in and day out.
Right.
Talk about monotonous work.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, the article even mentions he had a blog post where he talks about how he, like, never imagined himself doing this kind of work,
Oh, wow.
So, but here's where it gets interesting. He was super into flight simulator games.
Really?
Yeah.
Hold on. So he was like practicing this whole thing.
It's possible. I mean, at the very least, it suggests there was some level of premeditation there, this fascination with flight. It went way beyond, just casual interest.
And then there's that conversation he has with air traffic control while he's in the air.
Oh, yeah.
It's tough to listen to be honest.
Totally. Yeah, it's gut-wrenching.
For sure.
Yeah, and you can, like, hear the awe in his voice as he's describing the scenery, how it's all passing by so fast. There's this profound sense of wonder there, but also this underlying sadness, a sense of finality almost.
Yeah, he even says, like, I'm just a broken guy, and he's worried about being shot down. That's not someone who's just out for a joyride.
Right.
Absolutely.
No, the article suggests that he was dealing with something way deeper, maybe his sense of despair. Maybe he just felt trapped.
And then there's that part where he talks about the orca, the one carrying his dead calf. And the article connects that to unfulfilled dreams and unspent love. It's heavy.
It's a chilling parallel. And remember, he also tells air traffic control, I wish things could be different.
Yeah.
And that, along with his concern for not wanting to hurt anybody, I think it really paints this picture of someone who's just deeply conflicted.
Yeah, it's not as simple as him just being, like, reckless or selfish.
Right.
Some people definitely saw it that way.
And that's the other layer to this whole story is the public reaction.
Yeah.
The article talks about how some people saw him as this, like, modern-day space cowboy, this tragic hero who wanted to break free. But then on social media, it was a much more divided response. Some people were calling him selfish, unstable, even a terrorist.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. It just shows how differently we all interpret these situations.
Of course.
Based on our own values and experiences.
Yeah, and it also highlights the danger, I think. The danger in rushing to judgment, trying to fit really complex human behavior into these neat little boxes.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so we can analyze his words, his actions, all that. But at the end of the day, we can't really know what was going on in his mind in those final moments, so... But now, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go back to 1947, to a time when a bus driver could literally disappear for days and become a national sensation.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Okay, William Sumaila. Now that's a story that sounds like it's straight out of a movie.
It does.
No flight simulators for this guy.
Yeah.
Just this special sign slapped on a bus and off he went.
Just took off.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his story such a fascinating counterpoint to Russell's story.
Okay.
You have this guy who's seemingly driven by, like, pure impulse, this desire to escape that feels almost whimsical. compared to the darker undertones of Russell's flight,
Yeah, definitely. It's like he looked at a map and was like, Florida, I'm out of here.
Right.
But what's crazy is it doesn't even sound like he had a plan.
Really?
No real destination in mind. He just
Wow.
went for it.
And I think that's a big part of why his story captured the public imagination.
Yeah.
Especially back then, in a time before, instant communication, and you didn't have 20 or 47 news cycles and everything. His escapade had this real element of mystery to it,
Yeah.
and intrigue.
Yeah.
People were just, hungry for a good story,
Yeah.
something to distract them from the anxieties of, life after the war and everything.
And Sumaila delivered, man, parking his bus right in front of the White House.
Oh, no way.
Telling a policeman that he's waiting for, a delegation of union officials.
He's got guts.
I know, right?
Oh.
And then even sending that telegram to his boss from Florida, asking for $50.
Oh, that's classic.
The guy was like a natural at this.
It's amazing. It's almost as if he was acting out a collective fantasy or something, just chucking it all, hitting the open road, no plan, no worries beyond where to find the next gas station.
Right.
But it is important to remember, not everyone was thrilled about his little adventure.
Oh, yeah.
While the public was turning him into this folk hero, his family, they had a very different experience,
Right.
His son, Richard, he was only 12 at the time, and he talks about the fear, the confusion, this feeling of abandonment he felt.
Wow.
For him, this wasn't some fun joyride. It was a betrayal.
And I think that contrast is really where these stories, even though they're so different on the surface, I think that's where they connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have this public narrative of, freedom, adventure, all that. But then you have these private, very real consequences.
Of course.
For the people who are close to these men.
Exactly.
For Richard Sumaila.
Yeah.
His dad's actions weren't romantic or anything. They were irresponsible.
Yeah.
And they left him with, some real emotional scars.
Yeah.
It's like flipping a coin.
Right.
Heads, you're a folk hero. Tails, you've just completely broken your family's trust.
And it's even more striking, I think, when you contrast the son's perspectives. Right?
Yeah.
You've got Richard, who's struggling with the pain of his dad abandoning him. And then you have Dennis, who wasn't even born yet when his father took off on this bus trip. But he idolizes him.
Wow.
For his, free spirit, his sense of adventure.
Two sides of the same coin.
Totally.
So we have these two men separated by time, but connected by these, seemingly impulsive decisions. One takes a plane, the other takes a bus. But they're both clearly searching for something.
Right.
But the question is, what is it?
Right, exactly.
Is it just a yearning for freedom, a cry for help?
Yeah.
Were these just huge lapses in judgment?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, the articles don't really provide any easy answers. And maybe that's the point, We can sit here and analyze, speculate all day long. But ultimately, we have to just confront the fact that, human motivation is just inherently complex. What we might see as impulsive or reckless might be, for someone else, a desperate act of defiance, their last grasp at freedom.
It's true. It's like looking at a painting and trying to figure out, what was the artist really trying to say? We all bring our own baggage to the table, our own interpretations. But we can never really know for sure.
And maybe that's where the real insight is. It's less about finding the right answer and more about just accepting the ambiguity of it all,
Yeah.
Just understanding that human behavior, it's rarely black and white.
Totally. So where does that leave us? We've explored these two crazy stories, these totally unsanctioned journeys.
Yeah.
And I got to say, part of me kind of gets it,
Yeah.
That urge to just break free, say screw it, and just rewrite your own story.
It's a powerful impulse.
It is.
That yearning for something more, something beyond the day-to-day grind. And it really makes you wonder, what would your own unscheduled detour look like if you could just cast off all responsibility? What adventure would you choose?
That's the question, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily about the big gestures,
Yeah.
like stealing planes or driving buses across state lines.
Yeah.
It's more about those smaller acts of rebellion, I think. Those moments where you just decide to deviate from the plan.
Right. Even if it's just for a little bit.
Exactly. It could be as simple as I don't know, exploring a new part of your city. Finally starting that passion project you've been putting off.
Right. Or even just saying yes to something that you weren't expecting.
Totally. It's about
Yeah.
remembering that. Like, you have a choice, you know?
Yeah.
You're not just like a cog in a machine.
It's like that feeling you get when you, like when you take a different route home from work one day
Okay, yeah.
and you stumble on like a hidden gem,
Right.
like a cool little bookstore or a cafe you've never seen before, or even just like a view you never knew existed.
Yeah, those little detours that remind you that.
Yeah.
Like, life is full of surprises. You just got to be open to them.
Yeah. And honestly, that might be the most valuable takeaway from all this. Just remembering that freedom. It's not always about, these big pronouncements or these dramatic escapes.
Yeah.
It can be found in the quiet moments too, like in the everyday choices we make, to be more curious, to nurture those passions,
Yeah.
and just to live a life that feels, authentically our own.
It's about finding those spaces,
Yeah.
where you can just like breathe a little easier,
Yeah.
reconnect with that sense of wonder
Yeah.
and possibility.
Yeah, that gets kind of buried under, the weight of responsibility and routine.
For sure.
Exactly. And so, yeah, maybe we're not all destined to have our wild escapades, splashed across the headlines, but
Yeah.
we can all find those little ways to inject a little bit more freedom, a little bit more joy into our everyday lives.
Yeah.
It might not always be easy, but as these stories show, it's a journey worth taking.
Well, there you have it. Two guys,
Yep,
two
yep.
very, very different journeys,
Mhm.
but both reminding us that the human spirit craves freedom. It
Right.
craves adventure, that chance to write our own stories.
Hmm.
And yeah, we can't necessarily condone their actions,
Right.
but we can definitely learn from them.
Absolutely.
And that yearning for something more, that reminder that life's just too short to just
Yeah.
follow the same path as everyone else,
A few more.
So keep exploring, keep questioning things, and keep searching for those moments
Yeah.
that make you feel truly alive.